On the 22nd of May 1946, inside of Pankrac Prison, a site where the guillotine blade fell many times during the Second World War, a horrific Nazi war criminal was brought to his execution. He was approached by the executioner, who swiftly performed his bloody job, but the man who was executed was Karl Hermann Frank, who was in command of many different elements of the Nazi police. He was a man who had a long history of war crimes, and he was an ardent Nazi, who had joined very early on. His actions led to the slaughter and executions of thousands of people, and he was a man who was comparable with the butcher of Prague, Reinhard Heydrich, in his brutality and treatment of the people of Czechoslovakia. Join us today to look at the execution of Karl Hermann Frank, and as always, to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Karl Hermann Frank was born in January 1898 in Austria-Hungary, and he was taught by his father with regard to politics. His father was a proud nationalist who was angry with regards to the government, but as the First World War broke out, Frank tried to join the Austro-Hungarian army, but he was turned down because he suffered with blindness in his right eye. Because of this, he looked for a different career, and he spent a year at a law school in Prague, but he then became exposed to nationalistic policies in Germany and the ideas of the National Socialist Workers' Party, or the Nazi Party. Karl Hermann Frank then joined the Nazis, and he was involved in establishing different regional bases for the party in certain areas. He opened a bookshop in 1925, and this specialised in Nazi publications and books, and Frank also became a power behind the Sudeten German Homeland Front. He would become the deputy leader of this, and he was then elected as a member of the Czechoslovak parliament. But he was a Nazi still, and he was then, when the Germans were given the Sudetenland following the Munich conference, made the deputy Gauleiter, or deputy regional leader, in this part of the Reich. He then officially joined the Nazi Party, and also the SS, on the 1st of November 1938. In 1939, Frank was promoted to become an SS Gruppenführer, and he was then made the Secretary of State for the Reich Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, as the Nazis seized control of the whole of Czechoslovakia. He was serving under Konstantin von Neurath, and was named the area's higher SS and police leader, meaning he was in charge of the SS and the Nazi police in this region. This meant that he controlled also the Gestapo, the SD and the Kripo, and their actions, and he was very powerful. He had a huge amount of influence in the region and control, and he would also try to suppress elements of the resistance and those who dissented against the Nazi occupation. He targeted the Prime Minister, and he was much more hard-line than Neurath, who was considered soft. Karl Hermann Frank wanted roundups, torture and execution for those who would not fall into line, and Frank would usurp Neurath and would go to Hitler, and Hitler would back Frank and would adopt a stronger approach in the region. Neurath was later sacked, and Frank wanted to be appointed as a deputy protector of Bohemia and Moravia behind Reinhard Heydrich, and Reinhard Heydrich was given the power to do whatever he wanted in the area. Heydrich would carry out public executions, and also would slaughter many civilians to bring the rest into line, as he needed to keep the region productive and to keep up their quotas for the German war effort. Frank and Heydrich would work together in this, and their relationship was a notoriously good one, but this meant more suffering for the civilian population. They would terrorise the population and killed opponents, and also deported thousands of Jews to concentration and extermination camps. Thousands were arrested, and hundreds were being executed. But Heydrich would be assassinated in 1942, and it's possible that there were plans drawn up to assassinate Frank too. But following Heydrich's death, Frank was passed over for promotion, and Kurt Daluga replaced Heydrich, and the pair would organise the razing of Czech villages, including Ledis and Lazaki, as punishment for Heydrich's death. Frank ordered an SD chief to shoot all the men and to send all women to concentration camps, and to then rip children away from their homes, and to send them to Germany for Germanisation if they were deemed worthy of it. Other children were just murdered. Further promotions came, and Frank was then appointed as a General of Police in Prague, and he was also a Waffen SS General. He continued to become a feared beast, and he was the most powerful man in Bohemia and Moravia, and one of the most experienced in leadership, and he was then made the Minister of State, and was then able to attend cabinet meetings with Hitler with regards to the activities in the region. He would order further anti-partisan raids, and thousands of soldiers were then deployed in keeping the underground resistance down. They would carry out many executions, but the Germans could not destroy the partisan orders altogether, as they were too strong and they knew the areas too well. As the Nazis' empire crumbled around them, Prague stayed in control of the Nazis. It was the last major city amongst the major European ones to be freed. Karl Hermann Frank was defiant in his stance to defend the city from attackers, and on the 30th of April 1945 he made a broadcast over the radio. He said that if an uprising should occur, then he would drown anyone involved in a sea of blood, before ordering the streets to be cleared of anyone, and that the army and police should shoot anyone, including civilians, on sight. With this, the streets of Prague became a bloodbath, with many being simply executed for just leaving their homes. But at the end of the Second World War, Karl Hermann Frank was arrested by American soldiers on the 9th of May 1945. He was interrogated and processed before he would then, in 1946, be sent to Prague to stand trial for the crimes that he committed in this area. He had tried to flee, as he knew he was a wanted war criminal, and he was then represented by a Czech lawyer at his trial, which he considered a complete disgrace. He was accused of many crimes, including war crimes, and the horrific massacres he ordered after Heydrich's death, and for all of these crimes he was then sentenced to death. On the 22nd of May 1946, inside of a courtyard outside of Prague's Pankrac Prison, there were thousands gathered to witness the execution of the beast who had caused so much suffering inside of Czechoslovakia. Thousands were on the streets to witness the execution of Karl Hermann Frank, and it was said that those of Ladisla's widows who were able to come, and the widows of some of the 30,000 other Czechs for whose executions Frank had been adjudged indirectly responsible, occurred the second row of seats. But there was no compassion for Karl Hermann Frank. He was dragged out to the execution post, and he wore a ragged Nazi elite guard uniform and was paraded out between two guards. He was then led onto the scaffold, and the executioner then secured his legs and chest and passed a rope around the pulley and the noose around the top of the stake. The noose was secured around his neck then, and Frank then said, "Germany will live, even if we do not live." Following this, the ropes were released and he was left hanging. It was said that the spectators watched quietly in the bright sun as Frank was executed. His body was then buried in an unmarked grave, and the hangman kept the rope used to hang him as a souvenir. But he would then lose this following a night of heavy drinking. But Karl Hermann Frank was a horrific SS man who for decades was an ardent Nazi. He was an SS man who believed the Nazis would reign supreme over Europe, and his actions in the Czech region would lead to thousands being killed and slaughtered. He was a man who showed little remorse for his crimes, and went to his execution for this. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.